Yeah, films. We watched some films. So let's talk about those.
So, speculative fiction is the big thing about Margaret Atwood. So, she's well known for her work, The Handmaid's Tale, which is a dystopian tale about the oppression of women, where they're reduced to tools, their status determined by how they can best serve the men of Gilead. There is either incubators for their spawn, managers of their homes, or wives that are still subservient. And
Mhm.
Atwood has a talent for writing her horrifying realistic futures, and she refuses to label her work as science fiction, but rather encourages the subgenre of speculative fiction, which is entirely possible. She sees science fiction as something that we cannot do now, like travel to another planet and create things there, or
Mhm.
jump into a black hole that makes us into a different dimension. Like those things we cannot fathom to do.
Mhm.
But speculative fiction are things that are based on real world fact, things that are happened in our history that influence like a clear projection of the future,
Yeah.
and that it's taking place here on Earth. So that's kind of the distinction for her. My favorite series of hers is the Mad Adam trilogy that focuses heavily on climate change, overhunting, extinction, technological advances, and processed foods. The trilogy is being adapted for TV by Hulu. Very excited
Yeah.
to see that. And even Handmaid's Tale exists under the shadow of climate change, the environmental effects leaving most women barren and making those that could still bear children into rare delicacies for men in power. She also has pushed back against having her works be labeled as feminist, and we'll
Mhm.
say more about this next week. But she's just dissatisfied with the specific label put upon her and other women in the genre, such as Octavia Butler or Ursula Le Guin. Asking herself if The Handmaid's Tale is a feminist story in the New York Times, she responded, if you mean a novel in which women are human beings with all the variety of character and behavior that implies and are also interesting and important, and what happens to them is crucial to the theme, structure, and plot of the book, then yes. Which is like one of those problematic things about like people misunderstanding what feminism is.
Mhm.
I think it's more that she doesn't want like her work to just be called feminist because she's a woman writing about women's issues, but it is feminist.
Yeah.
And I think because we just forget what feminism is. It's just like when Taylor Swift was like, I'm not a feminist because I don't hate men," and we're like, "That's not what that is."
Yeah.
That's misandry, hun. Like you need to get a dictionary, and figure out what words are.
Yeah.
Her work is inherently feminist when her villain is so often wealthy, white, and male, obvious oppressive forces of women. This is also a villain for women of color and BIPOC people, but she's not too focused on intersection feminism, and she really enjoys staying in her lane. But write what you know, I guess. So I also found this really awesome Venn diagram of Atwood's work and their overlapping themes on Vox in an article titled How Margaret Atwood Became the Voice of 2017. And we have like a handful of her pieces because again like 50, right?
Mhm.
There's like nature is important and we are killing it, the future is going to be so incredibly terrible, and that includes like The Handmaid's Tale, The Heart Goes Last, Mad Adam, The Year of the Flood, Orcs and Crake. Women being terrible to women, this is the Robber Bride, Handmaid's Tale. Then we also have men being terrible to women, which is Alias Grace, the Penelope ad, the Blind Assassin, Lady Oracle. It's all over the place. Everyone cheats on their spouses. Children are monsters. Capitalism is evil. And let's remix some old stories and tropes. So a lot of overarching themes, but they all kind of blend into each other to tell these different stories, and the fact that there is some intersectionality happening, which is kind of understanding that things are layered.
Yeah.
In her Mad Adam trilogy, there are many unsettling biological environmental elements inspired by reality. In this cool article I found on Science Friday titled Four Ways Orcs and Crake Predicted the Future, authors Julie Liebeck Nicole Wetzman explain the possibility of Atwood's predictions, including glowing green bunnies. They say
Hmm.
in 2000, self-described transgenic artist Eduardo Cac introduced the world to a real albino rabbit that glowed green under blue lighting conditions. Her name was Alba, and her verdure came from a protein called green fluorescent protein, or GFB, encoded by a gene that had been inserted at the rabbit's zygote stage. Alba became the centerpiece of an art concept that Cat called GFP Bunny, which involved other components as well, such as a public discourse about the cultural and ethical implications of genetic engineering. Which is like, but you made this thing, like,
Mhm.
and then you're like, we should talk about the ethical.
Yeah, like, maybe we shouldn't have
Have you
done this,
created
but we did
thing?
it so that you would see that we shouldn't have done it.
Yeah. It's the Jurassic Park line, right? Like
Yeah.
we were so preoccupied with whether we
We
could,
could.
we didn't stop to see if we should. There are glowing green bunnies that appear in Oryx and Crake in book 1 of the trilogy. In that snippet, it says in the book, across the clearing to the south comes a rabbit, hopping, listening, pausing to nibble at the grass with its gigantic teeth. It glows in the dusk, a greenish glow filched from the iridocytes of a deep sea jellyfish in some long ago experiment. Which you wonder, like, the fact that her dad loved bugs and she was like existing in nature all the time with him, that
Mhm.
she is probably like well aware of what
Yeah.
happens in nature. Which, like, this part and part of why I like Mad Adam, it also reminds me of the Southern Reach trilogy, which is Annihilation.
Mm.
It's very realistic. There's also organ farms and genetic experiments that allow humans to live longer by way of not dying by pesky organ failure.
Yeah, like that
And
musical.
yeah. And in the book, it says the goal of the Pigoon project was to grow an assortment of foolproof human tissue organs in a transgenic knockout pig host, organs that would transplant smoothly and avoid rejection, but would also be able to fend off attacks by opportunistic microbes and viruses, of which there were more strains every year. A rapid maturity gene was spliced in so the Pigoon kidneys and livers and hearts would be ready sooner, and now they were perfecting a pigoon that could grow 5 or 6 kidneys at a time. Such a host animal could be reaped of its extra kidneys. Then, rather than be destroyed, it could keep on living and grow more organs, much as a lobster could grow another claw to replace a missing one. That would be less wasteful, as it took a lot of food and care to grow a pigoon. Um, Pigoons are terrifying. There's a lot of really terrifying things that people made in the Mad Adam trilogy. Pigoons are one of them. They're like
I'm
out there
like,
and they're like, pigs are smart as it is.
yeah, I'm also just like terrified by that. Like, I want to know what they've done already, you know?
Yeah.
Like
So if
what
that
already
sounded
exists.
terrifying, good news. It's a real
Oh,
possibility.
lovely. Thank you.
In that article that I mentioned earlier, an increasing number of researchers are interested in growing human tissue and organs in animals by introducing pluripotent human cells into early animal embryos, wrote
Yay.
Harry D. Wolinitz, the Associate Director for Science Policy for the NIH, in a blog post in
Mm, love that.
2016. So this is a minute ago too. Formation of
Mhm.
these types of human animal organisms, referred to as chimeras,
Love it. Yep.
holds tremendous potential for disease modeling, drug testing, and perhaps eventual organ transplant. And in 2015, Science reported that Bellamonte and his colleagues had identified a new type of human pluripotent stem cell that seems to be especially good at contributing to animal embryos. They ejected those cells into pig embryos to create chimeras that developed for 2 to 3 weeks and found that the cells contributed to the growing pancreas and heart, according to the Science article. Their chimeric research is still in the very early stages. However, don't expect pigoon transplant organs to be available anytime soon. But again, that was in 2015
Mm. I
that
have
that article will
so
happen.
many thoughts. It's just like, okay, I'm gonna put myself here too. So, oh wait, now how do we both be here? There we go. Um, so it's kind of like when you put something out into the world, you know, like literature or like movies or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like you're doing so as a way to critique the things happening unknowingly, maybe giving them the framework for how they can do it.
Yeah.
That's just like, that's where my head is at, where it's
Like
like,
any like crime show
yeah,
where you're like, oh no, have we just taught someone? Like how many people
yeah,
now know how to like get rid of a body because of Breaking Bad?
yes, no, exactly. Where it's like, if something is just like put out there in such a big way, where it's just like, oh dang. It's almost like they could have read this and been like, wow, that's a great way to oppress things. Or maybe we should try to genetically put organs into pigs. I didn't think of that before, but you know what?
Well, that's a
Honestly,
pretty good
look
idea.
at them. They really just came up with the spark that ignited the flame of this crazy thing that's now going to happen.
Yeah.
I'm
It's
not
like,
saying it's her fault. I'm just
no,
saying that it's crazy the way in which
it's
media just
happening.
happens, and then people are just like, this idea now.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't
It's
stop
kind
to
of like,
think if we should.
we made it. It's like, what came first, the pigoon or
Yeah,
the pigoon egg embryo
yeah,
that we put the
yeah.
organs in?
The idea of a
Yeah.
pigoon or the pigoon itself. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah.
Scary.
Because like part of it is like she's definitely getting her information from the real world,
Yeah,
which is why she writes things the way they do. But the fact that like a lot of the things that are like examples, like direct examples of what she's doing, like in that article, happen after her book.
yeah.
So you're like, mm,
Part of me is like, are the Republicans reading Parable of the Sower and just like being like, oh, it seems like a great way to
so
just,
that's how you do that.
yeah, oh,
Okay, taking notes.
yeah. I
Uh,
could be like Jarrett. He's my idol.
yeah,
I don't know. It's just like fun. The
yeah,
world. I'll let you
yeah.
keep going. Sorry about that.
Thank you. Yeah, it's very true. It's very horrifying. It is a little mix of like which came first.
Mm.
We would hope that people would learn the right lessons, but
Yeah, but
sometimes
like
it's
they
like a
don't.
challenge,
Yeah.
you know. More than the scientific predictions, the Mad Adam trilogy highlights the decaying society we live in with an emphasis on corporations and their power, as well as an all too real apathetic reaction to a pandemic. However, despite the eerie and heartbreaking world painted in the trilogy, there is a line of hope, a message we're familiar with the eco horror genre, that the Earth and other life will continue without us. And with
Sure
the
will.
apocalypse, it is only our world that changes. The world doesn't end completely. You don't read the Mad Adam series to see how the world breaks. You read it more to see how a new world can come from something which seemed always destined to break, explains writer Giles Allen Bowden in The Unnerving Relevance of Margaret Atwood's Mad Adam trilogy on the Boar. In Orcs and Crake, we meet the Crakers, genetically improved humanoids who are the next evolution of humanity. And they're better than us in a lot of ways, and they're very just like specifically created to make up for things that we lack. And they take from animals in certain ways. Like one of my favorite facts about the Crakers or things about the Crakers is that they purr. So like our cats purr to like heal us sometimes, like
They
to
better
ease
to heal
pain, and they
themselves.
purr to like heal themselves and each other. There's also like they're different colored, which was supposed to like they're all like different crazy colors, like blue. And this was like to alleviate racism. They also don't have like one like they don't have monogamy in,
Mm.
so they're like a whole community, and they just like they're like we breed to make babies and to have fun, and so they just kind of do that like
Yeah.
they're kind of fun. The Crakers are really cute. And they're just like cool new people.
Yeah.
uh Highly recommend reading to learn about them.
Now I'm like, I want to know. Yeah.
In The Heart Goes Last, we're offered a glimpse into an almost future inspired by the financial crisis of the early 2000s. Those who suffered terrible economic failure, living in their cars and scraping pennies to get by, find refuge in a new working city, a city built around a prison. The
Hmm.
residents rotate shifts between being staff at this prison and being inmates at this prison. So they have like a house. They're given a house with all the amenities, but for half the year, somebody else lives there and they live in a prison.
Hmm.
And then they switch, but it's like you get food, right? You can see the appeal versus living in your car and not knowing when your next meal will come, because all your needs are met here. You got food, lodging, safety. it's a place I could very easily see existing in Octavia Butler's Parable of the Sower. It's like a new form of slavery, which she hints at a lot in that book and in Talents as well. There's also this whole theme about sex workers, technology, fetishes, and sexuality mixed up together in a weird stew of Elvis sex bots.
Oh,
It's a
okay.
very interesting thing. Uh, Atwood has said, "Our stories are likely to be tales not of those who made it, but of those who made it back from the awful experience, the North, the snowstorm, the sinking ship that killed everyone else." And Atwood's speculative fiction morphs our realities into haunting mirrors, whether painting a world in which the American government is replaced by a militarized theocracy, hello, January 6th,
Hmm.
in The Handmaid's Tale, or a future in which civilization is wiped out by a man made viral pandemic, in Oryx and Crake, Atwood makes some compelling cases for a change. We are on track to an even worse future. It's only a matter of which one we choose. Indentured servitude through our flawed and disgusting incarceration system, the reduction of women to cattle, vessels for giving birth stripped of their rights and humanity, ethically questionable technological advancements that could be our undoing. Each world she builds is possible and similar to Butler's, a promise. And she, like Butler, doesn't want to just scare us. She wants to inspire us. She has said, "But there's no point in placing your confidence in hope alone. Hope should inspire action rather than be a substitute for it. To know you have a chance is what drives people to do amazing things."
Mm.
Um, which is really inspiring and interesting because Handmaid's Tale is so hopeless. It ends
Yeah.
hopeless. So we'll definitely talk about that. It's like, what,
You
girl?
yeah, you leave with like, if anything, that was my biggest gripe, is you leave no hope. There's just like,
No
"Oh,
hope.
Jesus, okay."
It was, I will say this, and we're gonna talk about it next week. Handmaid's Tale is very, um,
Don't look up.
no, it's a little don't look up. I see it as the Diary of Anne Frank
Hmm.
because that's literally what it is at the end. Like at the end, they're like, "We found this note. We found all these journals.
Mhm.
We think she might have been stowed away in an attic." Like they literally say it to you. They're diary entries. You get a glimpse of the world through the eyes of one person, and then it ends and we don't know what happens except like we know what happened to Anne Frank, but not everybody knows that, right?
Yeah.
It's, you don't know that when you're reading all the time until
Mhm.
the end is like, oh, her dad showed up a week too late, and you're like, what? And that's kind of like what the world is. So I
Yeah.
get it. I get like her being like, this is literally reality, like this is like,
Mhm.
but at the same time it is pretty hopeless. Matt Adam is a little less that, because it is more of like the earth is reclaiming itself,
Yeah.
in
Which
that
hopeless for
way.
humanity, but not for
Yeah,
everybody else.
yeah, and also like the heart goes last is kind of just like humans suck, and like it's the world sucks for us and we just kind of try to do it. It's a little more fun, I would say, than it's like it has a really serious undertone, but it's also a little more fun.
Yeah.
Also, random fun fact that Kat mentioned that I had at the end, is that in this New York Times article that I found titled "Margaret Atwood, the Prophet of Dystopia" by Rebecca Mead, they shared a fascinating story about Atwood's family history, because apparently an ancestor of hers was dubbed a witch and hanged for it.
Yeah.
It's literally like she just happened to know, like she was just not the typical woman, right?
Yeah.
Atwood ended up writing a whole poem about her. It was pretty interesting.
Mm.
But though she was hung, she didn't die.
Yeah.
So in this article it says it was before the age of drop hanging, so she didn't die. She dangled there all night, and in the morning, when they came to cut the body down, she was still alive, and she became known as Half Hanged Mary.
Hmm.
Atwood would later name Mary in her dedication for The Handmaid's Tale.
Yeah. That is super interesting.
I was like, that's cool. And I think that might have been like her learning about that was kind of this like, there's like the again the white feminist thing, but like
Mhm.
there's a trend of like our grandmothers were the witches you couldn't burn or whatever, like the people who are like trying to be witches now.
Yeah.
That habit, like that trend of like we were the witches you couldn't burn, is the same time period which people were like, I'm like an anti handmaiden, like is
Yeah.
that same like weird, like we're taking back. I
Yeah.
don't know. I saw this picture because I'm getting married soon. I saw this picture of like bad weddings, and one of
Mhm.
them was this theme, and it was Handmaids themed, and like the whole party was like in the Handmaids. I was like,
Yeah,
what?
like,
In
what?
what world do you think that's a good idea?
Yeah, you, like, missed the entire point by, like, 5 steps.
Yes.
It's wild. We'll get into it next week. I have, like, a whole little section where I'm like, people just don't they're like, "That seems fun," but they have no idea. They literally just
Well, it's like
don't
when
get it.
people were making the games for Squid Game.
Yeah.
It's like,
Or they made real Squid Games, like, that wasn't the whole point is to not do Squid Games, like, Squid Games was bad.
you don't want Squid Game to be real.
Yeah, it's almost like reality TV in a whole is extremely exploitative in a way to get people to do things that they wouldn't do in any other circumstance for money,
The
including, like,
vulnerable, yeah, exploiting
hurt
vulnerable people.
themselves and others. Um, yeah, no, it's the whole thing. People, like that's what I'm saying, like, media, it's very great, but also people take it and put it places in just, like, the weirdest ways that you're like, "That
You're not listening.
wasn't the thing. You were not supposed to do that." Or also it's like, "This wasn't for you." Like, stop acting like this was for you the whole time. Like, TikTok trends and, like, the appropriation of, like, Black music and culture in rich white kids just being like, "I'm gonna make this dance new again. This is about me." And it's like, it wasn't ever about you, and it continues to not be about you, and you are just, like, 20 steps away from where you should be. Stop.
Yeah.
Stop,
Yes.
ultimately.
I was trying when we record the next one, I was like considering like having, because we sometimes will do silly openings, and
Mhm.
I like had this thought was like, oh, what if we did that? And I was like, I don't want to be of my
Yeah.
partner.
Yeah.
That's gross. But now I'm like, we have covered the Handmaid's Tale show in our Oppression of Women series, and I want to rewatch it because I don't know if we introduced ourselves that way, but I
I
imagine
think
if we did, we were both like, eek,
yeah. No, I
when
mentioned
we
that
did it.
too next week too. I was like, I don't know if we did a bad job, but I think we were definitely in a different space of our journey of figuring one out who we are, and then also like our media literacy and critiques. Like, I think we were not quite where we are now. I don't think we did a bad job. I just don't know if we did a great job.
Yeah, this is
I
different.
know we dressed up as handmaids.
We did. We
I
did.
vividly remember
Well,
that.
I was a wife.
You were a wife,
You
yeah.
were a handmaid.
Yeah.
It was fun because that was a
Yeah.
good series. That was our Horrors of Society series. We
Yeah,
also
yeah, yeah.
covered population control, which I'll reference
Yeah.
next week as well. So there's a lot that is good in there,
Yeah.
but here we are. This is why we're covering the
Yeah.
book
I don't
specifically, and we're talking
exactly.
about some of the issues with it.
I
So
don't think we messed it up. I just don't know if we did, like, as good as a job as we've been doing lately.
yeah, you
That's
can
all I'm
always
saying.
trust us to be thorough. Like we're gonna
Yeah.
come back around. We're gonna fix it up.
Yeah.
we're gonna do it. Okay.
Before us is different than now us.
Always, always, always
Mhm.
growing. And just like we need you, Margaret Atwood, to do, you just say, like, listen, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm real sorry.
And some people will
I
just be like,
acknowledge that that is an issue.
yeah, some people won't forgive you, and that's also fine. Just,
Yeah.
like, say it though, because
Yeah, you
some
gotta
people
say it.
will.
You gotta say it. You gotta acknowledge. You can't just be like,
Eventually people forget
you have
or yeah.
power. You have
Yeah.
power. You may, like, we were just talking about it. Did you create the Pigoons by just
Yeah.
speaking them into existence in your fiction? Like, you gotta understand, you got power.
Yeah, they let you publish 50 books.
You gotta do something
I'm
about
just
it,
saying.
man. Yeah. So, so all this to say, read a Margaret Atwood. I like, you can read *Handmaid's Tale*. Absolutely, it is a fundamental read. I
It's
think it is
interesting.
pretty interesting. I think if you read it, you should also read Octavia Butler's Earthseed series.
Mhm.
Like, you should get the full picture because you're not gonna get it. You're not gonna get the full picture of what our immediate world is about to look like, um, unless you read both of those things. But read all the. I highly recommend the Mad Adam trilogy. Um, it's also really traumatizing, but it's very interesting. And when you
Mhm.
know that there are some real scientific things happening in there, it becomes even more interesting. And the rest of it, like Year of the Flood, was my favorite. And so that's the middle one.
Mhm.
So if you liked Annihilation, which I told you about,
I do
uh,
remember that. I
then
still need
you
to
would
read
like this
that
one.
too. Need to see if it's on the thingy.
Yeah, good luck. That one's a bit harder to get through than Mad Adam. But yeah, let us know how you feel about Atwood. If there's a book that we mentioned that's your favorite, let us know.
Yeah.
If there's another author out there that you recommend, I do have an Ursula Le Guin book. I have not read it yet. Into the Darkness, I think it's called, and that's because it is recommended. So read it, tell me, and I'll
Yeah, tell
look
us
it up.
books.
I'll look it up.
I'm like really into reading now, so
Yeah,
tell me some books
this
to
whole
read.
series is gonna be great for it. Yeah. And with that being said, don't get married.
I'll eat your kids. Yeah, they'll make you have them, or they'll make you never have kids again, or they'll do stuff, you know, the world.
Or the world's like, you know, climate change. So it's like,
Yeah,
what
the
are
kids melt.
Kids melt. Kids die because of the environment.
Yeah.
Or they get a new organ from a pig.
Or the pigs become people now, and they take over.
I'd be down. Pigs are cool.
Yeah,
Pigs
pigs
are my favorite animal. I love them. They're so smart. They're cute.
I vibes with it. I'm allergic to every animal that exists, so I've seen a pig, you know, but
nice.
I can't pet them or like talk to them because my eyes will swell shut.
Cute. I love them.
So
I'll talk to them for you.
that's why you can't get married on a farm. That's literally like the whole thing. Like, I'm very allergic to farm animals. It means that like in the apocalypse, like I can only do garden.
You just
can't have
that part. Yeah.
I can't have bunnies. I'll die. I can't have.
I'm allergic to bunnies.
Yeah, so I can't have any of it. I just have to eat plants forever, which is totally fine. I like plants.
That's what I do.
Yeah.
All right. Well, bye everyone. Survive the apocalypse. It's coming.